how our food systems work and really how they're changing to become more sustainable and resilient, and particularly the people that are driving that change. Our food systems are really diverse, and so we try to use the series as a means of illustrating that diversity. Just before I introduce today's topic, I wanted to just briefly go through some logistics. First, we're recording the webinar, so it'll be posted on our website afterwards. For you to use as an ongoing reference or for you to share with others, we welcome you to do that. The other thing is we really want this to be as much of a conversation as it can be. And so you'll see at the bottom of your screen the Q&A feature. And so as you listen and you have questions, please post those in the Q&A. And then the other thing you'll see is that there's an upvote button. And so if you see a question that somebody else posted and you're interested in that, upvote it, and that'll rise to the top of the list. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce today's topic, Oregon's statewide food and beverage co-packing assessment. So please join me in welcoming our speakers, Hannah and Eric.
Thank you, Sherry. Can everybody see my screen okay? All right, great. Well, my name is Eric Garman. I'm a trade development manager for the Oregon Department of Agriculture. I've been managing the Pacific Northwest co-packing locator for the past 7 years, and I'm excited to be joined by Hannah Kohlberg to discuss the state of food manufacturing and co-packing in Oregon. Hannah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm a connector and catalyst at the intersection of the food business startup ecosystem and the regional food system. I have a background in launching and scaling food manufacturing businesses and now farm with my partner. My mission lies in building a resilient regional food system that is equitable for all. And one of the projects I have been a part of in this vein that feeds into the work that we're sharing about today is Community Co-Pack, a flexible run contract manufacturer that's specifically supported BIPOC and women-led businesses. I did another Farm to Fork webinar on our theory of change about 3 years ago. So thanks for that, Sherry. And you can go check it out in the recorded webinars. And this is also why I was so grateful to partner with Eric and the Department of Agriculture to work on this project to really deepen my and our understanding of co-packing needs statewide. So let's start off with a little bit of grounding. What is co-packing? Contract packaging, contract manufacturing are terms that are used interchangeably, co-man, co-pack for short, to mean working with a manufacturer under contract, a legal agreement, to pack and process a product to certain specs and at certain scales. Why it is important and why it matters is that it helps food businesses and farms access scaled, efficient processing, specialized equipment, and or attain quality and food safety certifications. We like to think of co-packing as collaboration, and that's why Eric and I work to make introductions between brands and co-packers as part of our work on this project. Co-packing also supports a diversity of amazing entrepreneurs. Here are some of them in Oregon that have partnered with co-packers around the state. And several of these we worked with at Community Co-Pack. And I just want to share some of the scale of the interest in co-packing, which is that when with Community Co-Pack, we received 350 inquiries, and of those who submitted the forms, 52% identified as BIPOC, 69% identified as women, and 19% as immigrant, and 9% as rurally based, which I think we'll get into a little bit more of that nuance on the rural bit. Additionally, here are some examples of what co-packing looks like for farmers, with some examples of more traditional co-packing, canned peaches for the farm stand, or a jam jelly there. At the center is a collaborative co-packing barter of gleaned peppers, which I just think is super cool. And then at the bottom is sauerkraut made for a farm's CSA. So if you're wondering why we received so many interest form submissions at Community Co-Pack, it's inherent in the fact that scaling a food manufacturing business is an expensive investment in facility, equipment, procedures, training, and people. It's no small feat. The typical pathway that an entrepreneur takes is they start at a shared use commercial kitchen, then they scale into either building out their own facility or partnering with a co-packer, and they continue on this path as they grow and scale, either continuing self-manufacturing or partnering with a co-packer or finding a hybrid of the two, which many of our Oregon food brands do. So I want to keep this all in mind as it will be relevant to some of our takeaways later on. I'm going to pass it back to Eric to give you some background on our project.
Great, thanks, Hannah. So just a little project background. It all began in 2016, where a group of state agencies, NGOs, and private food and beverage companies gathered under the Food and Beverage Leadership Steering Committee. And there was a shared vision amongst these leaders and policymakers and economic development professionals to make recommendations of how to accelerate growth of Oregon's food and beverage sector through strategic investment. There were 5 key recommendations, including investment in public research and development facilities, coordinate workforce training and academic preparation to better serve Oregonians that want to work in the food and beverage industry, investment in the state's transportation infrastructure, a value-added food and beverage manufacturing marketing development strategy, which included a food and agriculture Oregon brand, and then better alignment with state and federal policies and regulations concerning food and beverages. Although in 2017, after the session, the Leadership Steering Committee began to lose some steam. However, the Oregon Department of Agriculture pursued some of the key findings, including, first of all, the Oregon brand. In 2018, the Oregon Department of Agriculture solicited a marketing firm to conduct outreach and a survey to better understand the appetite for a food and agriculture state brand. In addition, the Oregon Food and Beverage Export Alliance was formed. This is a group of Oregon agriculture commodity commissions that pooled funding together for an export readiness study with the Applied Economics Department at Oregon State University. To this date, in the last few weeks, this group has also headed to Washington, D.C. to discuss export-related issues with Oregon, with the U.S. senators and representatives. Additionally, that came out of the leadership committee was the idea that we have a lot of resources available in Oregon, but they're scattered throughout, and there's no one way to access these resources. Therefore, the Oregon Department of Agriculture worked with community industry and created the Food and Beverage Roadmap. This was created to help the community with community partners and designed to help food and beverage makers in Oregon better understand and access resources throughout the state. One of the opportunities through the Food and Beverage Roadmap was to update our Pacific Northwest co-packer locator. This is something that's been added to the site. It's access, working with the Washington State Department of Agriculture, access to co-manufacturing throughout the Pacific Northwest. In the future, we're also working with the Idaho State Department of Agriculture and merging all of our resources together so that we can better serve the needs of the food and beverage industry in these 3 states. In the additional resources to the food and beverage roadmap were networking opportunities, ways to grow your business, like through retail or e-commerce, education and training opportunities, human resources and workforce information, marketing opportunities, financing, loan, and possible grant opportunities, regulatory support through food safety and organizations that can support your food safety plan. We also recognize the needs to support food and beverage businesses of where they are in the process of growing their business. So for food and beverage entrepreneurs looking to start a food and beverage business, we created with the help of PCC's Getting Your Recipe to Market, a food and beverage journey map. This was designed to help businesses find their way through suggested timelines and on how to start their business. When we reached out during this time, we also reached out to the industry to help develop a library. Went too far. Help develop a library of expert articles. These articles were written by community industry experts, and the information is to help food and beverage makers throughout their journey, including everything from building your brand, working with co-packers, selling to buyers, as well as food safety and license information. And then as we were learning and doing outreach at that time, with the help of the Food Innovation Center, the Oregon Department of Agriculture put out a very simple survey addressing the needs for small to mid-size food and beverage businesses. What we were surprised to learn was that of all the needs, co-packing with low minimums rose to the top as the greatest need. So therefore, we looked at this current project of how do we assess co-packing in the state of Oregon. As we were since the first co-packing survey and food and beverage survey that we put out, we found that there were a handful of small co-packers that were willing to really try to fill those gaps and serve those small minimums. However, it was seemingly difficult problem to address. Although a lot of co-packers in the state have really done a really good job of working with small food and beverage makers, it's still hard to find these co-packing opportunities. So recently, we launched a statewide co-packing food processing and commercial kitchen activity. This was funded through a USDA specialty crop block grant, where we've traveled around the state to evaluate the needs and opportunities for producers. When we launched this project, we anticipated, most of the work was going to be around issues around co-packing. However, as we pulled back the layers of the project around the regions, we met with folks around the state and discovered that there are also issues for entrepreneurs' access to Oregon ODA certified commercial kitchens. For example, one maker in Cave Junction, a population of 2,000 people, motioned that there were 10 other food and beverage makers in the same community looking for a commercial kitchen. So in a small part of the state, in a small community in the state, having so many food and beverage entrepreneurs looking for the same resource, we saw that we did indeed have some issues that needed to be addressed. So some of the outcomes of traveling around the state and touring facilities, I wanted to give you just some highlights of each of the regions. For example, for the North Coast, there are no co-packers in that region. Distribution is very tough. In Central Oregon, it's a very vibrant food and beverage community, very beverage forward. Distribution is a challenge, and there were only 3 co-packers identified in that region. In Southern Oregon, it's a very mature food and beverage manufacturers, very rural-based food makers, and very few resources for this industry. In the Gorge, great regional food business ecosystem and local economic development groups, processing for tree fruit and stone fruit, and co-packers equipment is old and out of date in that region. In the mid-Willamette Valley, there was a huge loss of a processor for freezing and canning. There's a strong established food industry, several co-packers in that region that were packing for jams and bars and other types of products, but there was a lack of ample shared kitchen space. In the South Willamette Valley, it's a very well-established natural food sector, and also a well-established dairy sector. They have a lack of commercial kitchen space in this region, but a vibrant entrepreneur community. And then in the South Central Coast, there was a lack of co-packing infrastructure. Permitting was difficult, and a lack of entrepreneurial support. Tourism is a big support for small food and beverage players on the coast. And now I want to hand it over to Hannah to talk a little bit more about what we're learning.
As Eric mentioned, we have learned that there's a lot of nuance. We are a very diverse state, and the barriers and opportunities exist in different ways, differently across Oregon's regions due to scale, product type, process, and so many more of those sort of players that Eric has mentioned. At the start of our project, we had two co-packers shut down that really influenced our study and our work and the survey. So one of them was the Bliss Nut Butters. They're a small, medium scale nut butter co-packer that would work with entrepreneurs and farmers, and they were growing. They were seeing a lot of success, and they had actually expanded across 3 different suites and had attained SQF certification, which is a key certification for accessing higher volume retailers and more sales. They were seeking to grow more in the state of Oregon, but they were unable to find the right sized food manufacturing space to expand into that didn't require an enormous build out investment. So they opted to move their business to Colorado instead, which meant that one of their key clients and long-term clients that really worked out a lot of the kinks, because Bliss Nut Butters was also on entrepreneurs and also growing their business, was Elliot's Nut Butter. And just after winning a Good Food Award for his products, decided to shut down his business because there was no other regional option for him to co-pack his nut butters, and he didn't want to move his supply chain to Colorado. So when we launched the survey, that was really at the heart of our curiosity, is around capacity and needs and sort of what's happening out there. We were surprised to learn that many of the co-packers were actually reporting capacity. So you can see that on the left. They have capacity, but what we're finding is that capacity is mismatched by scale and processing capability, because these same co-packers are also turning down clients. And there's also some nuance here around product readiness of that entrepreneur. And through this project, we've been doing some education and tooling up those entrepreneurs as well. And on the brand side, what we're seeing is that the businesses that are co-packing aren't finding that right fit partner in Oregon, and that they're having to go outside. And so the question that we're currently exploring is, how do we bridge this gap? Where are their solutions? To ground this data, I'd like to share a few more stories of entrepreneur innovators. This is Nick Mendoza on the left. He worked with the Food Innovation Center on product development, for which they actually won an award. He uses Oregon landed fish in his product, but he didn't find a processing partner that was close to his supply chain. So he's co-packing out of state. Next is Heyday Canning, who are bringing new life to canned beans with gourmet flavor profiles. Their co-founder is an Oregon-based entrepreneur, and despite her expertise and industry experience, she was not able to find a co-pack partner in Oregon to meet the food safety qualification standards to launch nationwide with Whole Foods. On the right are the founders of Schmallow, a spray-on marshmallow topping that my kids adore. It's super innovative product and the first of its kind, and they've seen a lot of interest in their product, but they've really had to put the brakes on growth, because while there are existing co-packers for this product type, the minimums are completely inaccessible for a self-funded emerging entrepreneur. So while working full-time, he's slowly been building out his own manufacturing facility. They started in a garage and are now actually in one of those suites that Bliss Nut Butters left. So full circle. I want to dive next into some key findings around specialty crop processing. So the other co-packer that shut down at the beginning of our project was Sweet Creek Foods. And I really want to honor the legacy of Paul, the founder. He was a visionary, and when community supported agriculture movement was taking off, he was like, well, why don't we also have community supported processing? I'm like, yes, Paul. And so as an equipment genius, he set out to build a cannery, jar cannery, to process local organic goods. He processed overages and the not so pretty produce for numerous area farms. And I collected a lot of those labels, and it's really sweet to see what they made: tomato sauces and jams, preserves, applesauce. And he also built a brand around the premise of supporting organic farmers and became a significant contractor. But right now, our state no longer has this asset for farmers. And part of that is that Sweet Creek was one of our last medium scale regional canneries. The other one that's still operating is Muirhead Canning in the Dalles, but that equipment was the one that Heyday couldn't partner with. And generally speaking, our equipment, our facilities, they're aging. We have been an ag state, forever, and with a diversity of amazing space to grow. And so we've had processing facilities in Oregon, and in my opinion, now it's time to reinvest in those facilities. So moreover, on the topic of specialty crop processing, our survey showed that the co-packers surveyed won't process raw fruit and veg. And there's a really valid reason for this. In my own experience of being a food manufacturer, we would peel tomatillos and wash them and dice them in a Robocoo, and it worked at a smaller scale. While our beans were coming up to boil, we could process the veg. But when we started to grow and grow our sales, we really didn't have the time to do both of those things. So we started sourcing pre-processed frozen pureed tomatillos. So it's no surprise, right, that most of the regional co-packers, they want their veggies pre-processed in some ways. And we have some really amazing players in that ecosystem in Oregon, but they're scaled up businesses. They are businesses of scale. And so what does that mean for the small and medium farms and those farms that are trying to enter into institutional sales, for example, or work with a local food processor? So one of these farms that really elucidates this issue is Jim. This is Jim. He's the it's a third generation organic berry farm. He's out there in front of his mechanical harvester. And what we were dismayed to learn is that because Jim is only 35 acres, they're caught in the middle of a system that's built on scale. He's a primary supplier to a local organic food manufacturer that has good pull and pulls most of his crop, but to make the kind of consistent processing of a food processor work with the seasonal harvest of these berries, he has to store those berries in the freezer, and the cost of everything has just risen, including that freezer storage. And right now, he's not sure if it makes sense, again, at his scale, to continue working in that way. So I am seeing that there's a need. We are seeing that there is a lot of need around re-regionalizing our supply and processing this specialty crop. There's potential and need for high pressure pasteurization. That's a need identified from a lot of entrepreneurs. The freezing aspect that I just talked about, and freezing's also not allowed under the expanded Farm Direct laws. So another opportunity at that smaller scale. Pepper processing, freezing and drying for all of our amazing hot sauce and chili oil makers. Small scale jam making that's in partnership with statewide berry U-Picks and food banks. And then local garlic processing, because a lot of that is coming from out of region, and we really can do it here. So on our tours around the state, as Eric mentioned, we were able to really get to know the rural realities and needs. And there are so many rural food entrepreneurs. This is a state of the ones that this is a state map of the ones that hold an ODA license, but this doesn't even cover those that are operating under Farm Direct or cottage laws. And as Eric mentioned, right, the shared use commercial kitchens that are out there, these are the hearts on this map, are not located in many communities. And the ones that are located in communities, what we've been seeing are that they're not just necessarily designed for the scale of processing that is important. So on our tours, it's been really clear that kettles, rack ovens, the 40-quart mixers are really key. And Eric, can you do the next slide, please? Thank you. And so when a shared use commercial kitchen doesn't have those, it supports more of the caterers and the food trucks, which is amazing. And they're part of our entrepreneurial ecosystem as well, but it's not necessarily designed for food processing. And so those kitchens that have those kettles are in high demand. Because of this rural reality, the entrepreneurs in the rural communities have to carve out another path. And what we've learned is that actually a lot of these entrepreneurs are deciding to build out their own facilities rather in their garages or, kind of nearby, instead of driving an hour to work in a shared use commercial kitchen or with a co-packer. So it brings up this slide again of this ecosystem perspective of, if we are to support businesses along their path of growth, we really need to ensure that we're building solutions and access at every scale and for every region. So what do food and beverage manufacturers want, and how do we support them? What our survey is showing is that food entrepreneurs, manufacturers, they want to build sustainable regional businesses. And surprisingly to us, right, we set out to study co-packing and access to co-packing. A lot of them want to build out their own facilities. The majority do. And, taking that route, as we know, is requires funding and expertise. There's Paul showing off his boiler. There's some team members at Decasa Fine Foods welding a piece of used equipment. There's Brian showing off a fabricated piece of equipment. It's really a tremendous feat to build out a manufacturing facility. These are some of the other entrepreneurs that we visited on our tours. They're working in small spaces. This is a, side shed that he's made, past audits with for Whole Foods, really tight spaces, and getting creative with their, friends and community to build out coolers. So it's very clear they're very creative and scrappy, but they have needs. And one of these is a need around equipment. This is Three Little Figs, a small scale co-packer in the Portland area. Their key bottleneck is that filler. And they were, said if we were able to upgrade to the next level, which is a tremendous jump in cost, they would be able to add more co-packing capacity, but they're not able to fund that personally, and are already over leveraged, as many food businesses are. And so they're limiting their growth or just operating at current efficiencies. And this is true of those who's answered our survey. So we see an opportunity to support all food and beverage manufacturers, co-packers, shared use commercial kitchens with more funding for key equipment and processing lines, similar to how Washington has been investing about $9 million annually in their local food systems. So I'm going to pass it back to Eric to talk about what's next.
Great, thanks, Hannah. So what's next? So thanks to organizations like Oregon State University, Built Oregon, SEDCOR, Eugene's Table, and the project that we're working on, the Oregon Business Council established a food and beverage task force to create a strategic roadmap aimed at supporting and promoting the food and beverage industry within our state. This initiative is designed to foster an increase entrepreneur capital investment and innovative breakthrough in Oregon's food and beverage sector. As Hannah and I continue our tours around the state, a couple of more areas that we will be stopping in includes the Salem, the general Salem vicinity. Eastern Oregon is coming up in a few weeks. And then the South, we'll do a South Coast outreach. And when we finish up our work, we will then have a final report that we would love to share at a future talk and a future webinar with Sherry. So thank you so much. And thanks for having us. If you have any questions, please let us know. And if you'd like to take the survey or find out a little bit more what the survey is about, please do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry.
You guys did an excellent job concisely telling a very complicated story. So thank you so much for that. I have to say it's really been impressive. And I think one of the things that Oregon's food and beverage sector benefits from is people like you. There aren't that many people in the state who sort of are both doing a lot of things that are really meaningful, but also connecting the things that are happening. So anyway, thank you for that. I certainly appreciate it. So if people have questions, we would love to hear from you. And then I also have some that I've been kind of capturing too. So Amanda asks, have you found issues with food safety and regulatory compliance for small businesses scaling up from on-farm production or commercial kitchen? I've found issues with validation of process and documentation of CCPs with some smaller businesses that I've worked with.
Yes, it's definitely a huge opportunity, and actually part of the feedback that we're receiving both from co-packers and small food businesses is that, you know, they want to grow, they want to meet these food safety standards, but they need training, and the cost of training for some isn't accessible, or, you know, the founder sort of has that training, but to train all their staff is another level of what they need to step into. And um, there's just tremendous knowledge that's needed there. And some of the coaching that I do, you know, I spend some time with entrepreneurs talking about that. And I'm no expert, Amanda. It sounds like you are one, right? And we need more of that knowledge transfer in a way that's can really build food safety systems up from the, you know, bottom level, like build it into your system and culture early on, so it's not this crazy jump when you do want to go work with Whole Foods, for example. And that's why some of the resources that Eric has shared on the expert articles on the food and beverage makers roadmap are really amazing. There's a few from Terry Danielson about food safety culture there, so definitely everyone go look at those.
Thank you. Amanda also asks, how do you think the FSMA final rule and requirements for additional traceability records for certain foods will impact small businesses that use co-packing? She has another question, so you can answer that one first.
You know, Amanda, I have to be honest, I don't know about that specific rule. But one of the conversations that we had a lot at Community Co-pack was, how do we weave in and continue to work with small farms like many of our makers did? They would, you know, contract with regional farms that didn't have the wherewithal to put a certificate of analysis together and all of that, and comply to food safety standards and systems. And we never quite, you know, figured out that perfect thing. I mean, one thing I'd love to see is, again, some upskilling for smaller farms, or a process of like, hey, here's your templated documentation. Maybe that's a little crazy. Maybe folks don't want that, but just that we can continue to source from smaller farms and support them in that way, and we don't have to just shift all to, you know, the scaled up and organized you know, suppliers with those food safety programs.
And then Eric, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about ODA's food safety, the food safety arm, which you're not part of, just as a resource for these kinds of questions.
Yeah, so although I don't work in the food safety department, I know that you know, Oregon is made up of small farms and high quality products. And so in terms of, you know, co-packers bringing in these products to make sure that they're up to the food safety standards, it's going to be a little bit more challenging, and it's going to require a little an extra step. We have a wonderful food safety group at the Oregon Department of Agriculture that can assist in this, but we also have we're a state of food safety experts. We have a lot of them, and we're really food safety forward. And I think that through our outreach, doing this project is leading with, you know, food safety first. And so although I can't get into the specifics about what our department is doing, I can assure you that we, as the whole community adjusts, we'll adjust with them.
And then Amanda has a third question. She says, has your program considered working with a lab and consulting group to assist? I know cost is prohibitive, so.
I'll say, you know, at Community Co-pack, we explored that. We partnered with the FIC. We also worked with a lab group to see if we could make it a little bit more accessible, some of their services. We didn't quite land on anything perfect. There's some really cool programs that are happening of subsidizing coaching for businesses through Prosper Portland and Accelerate Women. And so we were trying to sort of track them into that, since we were also offering services and knowledge at that level. On the small food entrepreneur side of things, I think a lot of them really do care tremendously around food safety, right? And so the ones that I'm working with, the ones I know, they are sending their products to local labs, but they're doing it kind of in a, more DIY method, where they're maybe again just getting that lab result and then integrating the knowledge into their process and procedures in that regard. So I hope that's helpful. Thanks for all those awesome questions, Amanda.
Yeah, I also want to add, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
thanks for the questions around food safety. And I think in a lot of ways, sort of these initiatives are just getting going and just starting up. And I think that more involvement, if you'd like to be involved more, Amanda, in the project, and if you have some ideas or suggestions, we would really like to invite you to be a part of, part of the solution. And so I'm really excited. It's never since I've been working at the Department of Agriculture, I haven't seen as much excitement around gathering together and really putting some initiatives together to push forward food and beverage. And so it's an exciting time, and the more folks that are educated in food safety and marketing and everything, the more the merrier, as far as we're concerned, to be involved.
Question, what do you feel like Oregon can learn from other states around how to more optimally set up a co-manufacturing infrastructure, or is that work still would need to be done?
Part of me thinks that we're ahead of the curve on this. There are regions and cities, and there'll be certain areas, throughout the U.S. that are doing it well. And we've taken calls from the East Coast. We've taken calls, throughout the Southeast and in other parts of the U.S. of small regions that are doing it well. But I think all in all, as we learn from these different regions, Oregon's really kind of blazing a trail here too at the same time, because the amount of attention that we're focusing on these small to mid-sized food makers and the issues around manufacturing is all new. And I think there are actually other states that might be looking toward us as the problem solvers as well.
Gonna be my second question, so thank you. And then I guess one last question that I have: were there things that you learned as you've gone around the state and talked with people, or through the survey, that were surprising to you based on what you knew kind of going into this work? Whether that's the difference between the reality versus perceptions. So I would just be curious about, that. I think that would be helpful for the audience too.
One thing that I learned, and I think I shared this with, I think I shared this with our team, and it's something that I knew, but really discovered when we were doing our outreach, is that Oregon is made up of different regions, and each region is very unique and different. And I think that, as we talk as a state, or as we have conversations as a state, we need to recognize the differences between the regions, and that the importance and the competitive advantages that they have in their regions, and what they grow, what they produce, and what their their group of entrepreneurs and expertise is.
Excellent,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I'll jump in, and I mean, I shared this a little bit in the presentation, but definitely this connecting with several co-packers that are coming out of COVID, a lot really that I, talked to more through entrepreneurs, right? Oh, co-packers are at capacity, they're not able to take on our product. But to find that there's an eager group of co-packers and people that have stepped into co-packing that are seeking clients that are, that have capacity, and they want to work with people, but it's again that kind of like super matchmaking puzzle of how do we really get those right fit together. That is really important. So I was, yeah, kind of excited to hear that there's folks that are eager, interested, and wanting to dive into this work in this world and offer co-packing services, and just how much there's sort of also this standard idea that co-packers are hard to work with, or not very helpful or not communicative, but there's also this whole host of businesses that are offering co-packing services that are tremendously helpful and really show up for their clients and do a lot of education and a lot of hand holding, etc., and show up for the community as well. And that I think that's something we all know about Oregon, is that um, we care about each other and we are kind and we show up for each other, but that also is true of our co-packing industry.
Awesome. And I have to say that, just to sort of circle back to the work of the Food and Beverage Council, I think the timing, the state is really lucky, quite frankly, that ODA stepped into this, and Hannah, that you were kind of brought so much perspective about kind of going into this work, because it was ready when the state was really paying attention and kind of ripe for guidance about what to go do, right? So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We really appreciate it and appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you.
Thanks for
So,
having us.
thanks again to all of you who took the time to join us today. The recording will be posted on the website, so I encourage you to share with others. This is really exciting work that we really want to make sure gets out to everybody who would be interested in it. And also thanks, Amanda, for all of your questions. I absolutely love that kind of engagement. So thank you for your thoughtful questions. And then you'll also see a link in the chat for a survey. So this is only as useful as it really reflects the things that you're interested in. So please take the time to provide us feedback in the short survey. And then we also do these monthly, although we're taking the summer off, and know that we want to let you spend as much time outside as you can. So we'll be back September 19th. We're going to move the fall webinars to Thursday, with the hope that that kind of works better for everybody, just based on feedback. But we wish you all a wonderful summer, and thanks again.